Grand. Brilliant. Hello, everyone. My name's Anne-Marie Canning. I am the Director of Social Mobility and Student Success at King's College London. I have a bit of a pick and mix talk for you today. I'm going to be talking to you about widening participation, social mobility, the role that behavioural insights can play in that, and also how online technologies are starting to change how we carry out outreach with underrepresented learners. You can tweet me at @amcanning. So I want to begin by asking you to contribute. When I say the word social mobility, what does it mean to you? What does it make you think of? How does it make you feel? Is anyone willing to share? Anyone willing to share how they feel, what it makes them think of? Usually people say Billy Elliot. You'd be welcome to say that. Ian?
Removing barriers.
Removing barriers, yes.
I think it's a value-added education, not just a good education. So it's what value it adds to it.
Yeah. Lovely, like the distance travelled, yeah? Any other contributions? Yeah?
Globalization.
Sorry?
Globalization.
Globalisation, yeah, absolutely. Anything else? Okay, brilliant. So I often ask people to think about what social mobility means to them because it's a very contested term and there are various terms we can sort of use to describe what we're trying to do here, which is essentially to ensure that where you're born doesn't define where you can end up. And unfortunately, that is the case here in the UK today. But it's really important for me on a personal level because my own story is one of social mobility. It's very unusual for people from my postcode to end up in this lecture theatre giving a talk like this. I was born in Doncaster, which is in Yorkshire, which is in the north of England. I went to a school where very few students went to university. In fact, only 2 of us from a school of 2,500 children. That area of Doncaster remains a place where very few people go to university. But my life was transformed when I went on a summer school at the University of Oxford. It opened up higher education to me, and from there I studied at the University of York. And the photo on the right-hand side is me just elected as a city councillor. So I did some politics in my spare time and was elected to represent the people of the city of Oxford. Now those 2 photos from 1988 through to a couple of years ago really demonstrate what higher education can do for young people, really demonstrate why social mobility is important to the individual. So social mobility is important to individual students. It's important to students like me, but also students like Connor. Connor is a 4th year medical student here at King's. He is someone I've known since he was 16. He participated in one of our outreach programmes. He came to King's to do the extended medical degree programme, where he was given an offer of 3 B grades and took the course for medicine first year over 2 years. Connor has intercalated recently. He's got a first-class degree in immunology, and most importantly for me, Connor is top of the medical school. Connor is our stellar student in his year in the medical school. And this is a student who, by all the statistics, all the rules of social mobility, shouldn't have made it through to become a doctor. So Connor gets to fulfil his potential. Here at King's, we benefit from one of the brightest minds from one of the most unlikely postcodes. And more importantly, broader society ends up with one of the best doctors it could possibly imagine to serve our people. Social mobility is an individual good, it's a good for the university, and it's a good for broader society. And I'll touch upon that later. So it matters to me because of my own story, but it matters to me because of students like Connor. Now, it doesn't just matter because it is something that makes us feel good about the world, something that's unjust. It also matters in hard business terms. This is my favourite academic in the entire world. I'm sorry, Ian, you've been pushed off the top spot by Professor Raj Shetty now. He is an academic at Stanford University. Actually, he's just become the youngest tenured professor at Harvard at the age of 28. It's completely sickening. Raj Shetty is an economist who has looked at massive data sets to understand what social mobility might mean for broader society and economic well-being of countries like the US. He has this fantastic concept of lost Einsteins. If you imagine all the talent we've missed out on because we're socially immobile, all the brilliant inventions, innovators, all the mini Einsteins that we've lost out because we've not made full use of potential in society. Well, Raj Shetty has done the equations on this. He's actually worked out that if the US was making full use of the range of potential in its society, then it would have 4 times the level of productivity that it currently has. That's an incredible gain in terms of productivity. And you see similar sorts of gains here in the UK as well in terms of productivity, but also GDP. This is a common good, it's an essential for a healthy society. Now, unfortunately, here in the UK, we are completely preoccupied by social mobility, but not very good at it, unfortunately. So the UK has something called the Social Mobility Commission. What this commission does is it sort of monitors where we are in terms of social mobility. It publishes a State of the Nation report each year, and unfortunately, the UK is the least socially mobile country in the OECD. It also has the highest levels of inequality. There's all sorts of things you can read about in terms of what that means for broader society. But put quite simply, we're not good at this. We have seen some minute gains in terms of who gets to go to university, but there is a fundamental problem at hand here in the UK. And if you wanted to make broader assertions, you might start to understand where we are politically as a result of social immobility. Now, things can be different. Countries can make very big leaps in terms of social mobility. Two countries that have managed to do it, France and Canada. Here at King's, I am lucky enough to work for an institution that believes it can make a difference on social mobility. And so for our 200th birthday in 2029, we have set our vision, and our vision says that we want to be the top university for social mobility, but also that we really care about what happens to learners when they join us. It's not just about getting students in, it's about thinking about what happens to them once they're undergraduate students here at King's College London. Disadvantage doesn't melt away when a young person enrolls on a course, walks through the doors, or logs on to their online course. So we're going to do this by caring about students as individuals, but being really smart with our mainstream interventions. What are the big things we can do that have better endowment effects for particular groups of learners who are affected by things like attainment gaps and labour market gaps? So we have a full life cycle approach here at King's College London. We want to work with young people when they're very, very small, so they're in primary school, so we have local education centres that we sponsor, all the way through to the labour market. So we take a really holistic view of how we support a young person through each stage of their journey. Now, I think we've done a pretty good job in terms of social mobility, in terms of getting students in to King's. So over the past 5 years, actually 6 years today, my birthday at King's, 6 years today, over the past 6 years, we've taken our numbers in quite a dramatic direction. We've changed the face of who a King's undergraduate is. So we've gone from 70% state school intake to 77%, against a backdrop of those numbers falling in UK Russell Group universities. We have the fastest growing population of low-income students in the Russell Group. Nearly 40% of our students are on a form of substantial financial aid. We have taken our black and ethnic minority learner enrolment up by 10%, which is one of the largest jumps ever seen in higher education. So it went from 38% and on a downward trajectory up to 48%. I think this year we will hit 50%. And finally, we have the largest population of mature learners in the Russell Group. We have more students over the age of 21 when they enrol with us for their undergraduate degree than any other university in the Russell Group. And we've got there through very intentional programmes where we evaluate them, we innovate, we see what works, we do more of the things that make a difference. We also do a variable and contextualised admissions process, so we will make variable offers, so lower offers for students who are showing great potential. But really now, I think the agenda for our higher education sector is to think about what education is doing for young people. Like I said, it's not enough to get them through the door. And I became really preoccupied by this conundrum a couple of years ago, because I was bringing students to King's and sort of saying, fly my pretties, and then they were coming back to me and saying, I'm finding it difficult to fly here, is there anything you can do to help? So for me, I started to think, what's on offer at King's and how are students experiencing it? Now, I always imagine the student experience like a jewellery box, okay? Imagine a jewellery box, there's loads of brilliant things in there, you know, loads of jewels and pearls and all sorts of wonderful stuff. What we see in our data at King's is that there are some students who repeatedly reach into that jewellery box and take out some of the best jewels on offer. So they'll do study abroad, they'll do an internship, they'll do an undergraduate research fellowship. And there are some students who are just getting by. They are simply surviving. They are not making full use of all the things available to them, or they're not able to because of how we've set up those experiences. So I became interested in how we take a stratified student experience and really start to open up those opportunities to a broader spectrum of our demographic. After all, we've got all these students here from different backgrounds. It's up to us to make sure we're serving them and allowing them to flourish. So stage 4 and 5 really zooms in on the positive student experience and what happens when students enter the labour market as well. So around this time I was reading a lot of behavioural economics. I'm that sort of person who will read behavioural economics before bed, and I read this book called Nudge by Thaler and Sunstein. Has anyone read this book out of interest? Couple of people. Okay, great. One of our vice principals at King's, Jonathan Grant, says this is one of the 5 books you need to read to be successful in life. And I'm pretty sure he says that because it has got the sort of magical equation to get your partner to do the washing up or whatever it is. So I would highly recommend you read it. I read Nudge and I thought, here is a technique, here is an innovative approach to connecting students with the things I know will make a difference for their time at university. And all of us will have encountered nudges in the wild. Here are some that I've been collecting over the past couple of years. So most of you will have been on the tube today. You know to stand on the right-hand side of the tube. Even if you're not a Londoner, you know pretty quickly that that's what you're meant to do, because you're experiencing social norming, everyone else is doing it, you've got the feet sprayed onto the escalator, you quickly fall in line. You're receiving lots of cues about how to behave in that sort of environment, what the rules of engagement are. And I remember this quote from Nudge stood out to me. A choice architect has the responsibility for organising the context in which people make decisions. That's what we've got here at the university. That's what this lecture theatre is. It's a piece of choice architecture. So I started to think, well, maybe we could be more mindful about how we use the choice architecture here at King's every day for students who are learning with us. So very simply, if you want someone to do something, you need it to be 3 things. You need it to be easy, you need it to be attractive, you need it to be social, and you need it to be timely. Universities are bad at all these 4 things usually. It's just how it is. It's actually very hard to hit all 4 of these things. You can usually get 1 or 2, but to hit all 4 is very difficult. So this is a framework published by the Behavioural Insights team, who we worked with on a 2-year project exploring the use of behavioural insights in higher education. It was the first application of behavioural insights in a UK context. This has happened at Harvard and Toronto, but it hasn't happened here in the UK until we ran this project. So using the EAST framework, we decided to test a few things. So I'm going to show you one of the trials we tested here at King's. I chose one that I thought you might be interested in because it's an online study skills module. We actually have delivered over 20 randomised control trials now. And at this point, it's really important to just pause to think about using a randomised control trial in a higher education environment. So what we're doing here is we're taking the population of the first year students at King's, we're dividing them into treatment groups. Some students will not receive a treatment on a particular trial, but will receive it in subsequent trials, and then we will vary the treatment across the other groups. It allows us to understand causalities, it allows us to start to really unpick what is actually working for students here at King's. So I'm going to show you one called the class trial. Students were in their first year and they were told they were enrolled onto a programme called King's Tips. They were allowed to opt out. Only 8 students opted out. Most of them it was because they'd actually left the college. So it was a very popular programme, and when we did some qualitative work afterwards, students felt very loved by receiving the tips, which were text messages to their phones. Actually, this is a little example just to get you warmed up to the idea of a randomised control trial. This is one of my favourite trials, getting bankers to donate salary to charity. What percentage do you think will be in the control group who will be giving a day of their salary? What percent do you think will give, without any prompt, give their salary for a day? 5%? Well done. Okay, so when they're not asked, 5% of bankers will give a day's salary. When they're asked by a celebrity, it goes up to 7%. Not a very famous celebrity, apparently. Always add that caveat. When you give them a tiny pack of Haribo sweets on their way into the office and then ask them to give, it goes up to 11%. I mean, literally those like where you get 3 sweets. That seems to be magic. When you send them a personal email saying, "Dear Sarah, please will you give?" goes up to 12%. And here's the mother load. Let's put together the sweets and the personal message. Whoa, it's 17%, which is really impressive to say you've just tweaked how you've asked the question. The Behavioural Insights team have had all sorts of successes on organ donation and tax payment, using techniques just like this. There have also been some fantastic trials in education. I don't have time to show you them all today, so I'm going to show you the King's specific one now. So we wanted students to sign up for online study support in their first year, so they became confident in using the resources and accessing their learning opportunities. So we had the control group who received no messages. We had students who received something called a planning prompt. Very simply, if you make a plan today to do the thing you don't want to do, you're more likely to do it. So all of you who are sort of umming and ahhing about dealing with your pension situation, just say you'll do it tomorrow. You're already like so much more likely to do it. And then the next message combined the planning prompt and a message called a micro-affirmation, which simply acknowledged that it can take time to adapt to learning at university, okay? So we'd read the literature, we'd done a review of various pieces of research, we decided this was our best bet to try and reach particular forms of learners. So remember, I'm interested in learners from non-traditional backgrounds, I'm interested in low-income students in particular. So this was the result when we looked at who had accessed the online studies support module. Okay, so non-WP, they're your home, high-income learners. WP are low-income home learners, and unknown international, well, they're your international students. So you can see that's pretty low rates of access already, which is not great. So when we put in the planning prompt, we have boosted numbers by a good few percentage points. Particularly for widening participation learners. And then we add in the belonging prompt, and suddenly it's at 20% for low-income students. And we can see that actually for international students, it's having quite a significant effect as well. So all of these are significance tested, so we are getting significant results. If students had not received these treatments, this wouldn't have happened. We can be fairly confident of that, thanks to the statistics. Now this, you might be thinking, well, 9% to 20%, that's not a big result. That represents probably a grade 5 officer role going around promoting this activity to students. So just by sending a text message, we've got a more efficient way to reach out to learners. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do the face-to-face stuff, it just means we've got more tools to help students to be successful. Some of the interesting things from our project, and we have published online the entire report, international students behave more like low-income home students than high-income home students, which was really counterintuitive for us. We had lots of failed trials, which we've also published. Really important to be honest about what doesn't work, because this is the deal. You try new stuff, you innovate, you have to evaluate, you have to do that. That's part of the sort of iron rule of innovation. You innovate and you evaluate, otherwise you become unethical. So this is sort of develops preoccupation within my division, within my team, of thinking about how we design in advantage and design out disadvantage. So it's really interesting listening to Neil's presentation about unbundling. Unbundling to me seems like possibly the worst thing we could ever do for widening participation learners. Students who walk into university don't have a parent to guide them through the situation, and then we just give them a whole bunch of choices. So for me, that's a really good example of how you can think about designing in or designing out disadvantage. Take something like a university reading week. I don't know if you've ever thought critically about what a reading week is. If anyone knows what a reading week is, please let me know, because no one seems to have decided. I've actually done a research project on this for my master's. No one can tell me what a reading week is at any university anywhere in the world. And when you have a big space of time like that plonked in the middle of the semester, you can bet your bottom dollar, and I know this because we've done the research, high-income students are using it to relax and revise. Low-income students are using it to earn money and to care for their relatives. So already we're designing a space where some students can leap ahead of others, and then we wonder why we have attainment gaps. We need to be really conscious about the choices we're making and the design of our services and opportunities. Here's a really great example, a really simple tweak that we've done this year. If you want to do study abroad at King's College London, you apply, you're allocated your place, you're then asked to accept or decline, and then we'll decide whether to give you a bursary or not. If you're a low-income student, you need those last two steps just flip the other way. So we give you your bursary, and then you decide whether to accept or decline. It's just being mindful about different learners' needs, different learners' approaches to various opportunities that are put in front of them. So online stuff is becoming a larger part of what we do. Most of our activities, and we work with around 15,000 undergraduate students each year. It's eyeball activity, right? It's getting students in front of students, it's talking to teachers, it's working with young people on campus, it's a contact sport. But our limiting factor is our staff members. So we have 15 staff members who work on the outreach phase of our social mobility strategy. So we decided to try and boil down all of our information and expertise onto a website. It's called gameplan.ac.uk. The fight we had to get a .ac.uk was tremendous, but we got there in the end. And this is a gamified online website where tiny children aged 10 or 11 can play games and find out about university. It's completely ridiculous. It's quite trippy. At one point you have to create a burger, but the different parts of the burger are different qualifications. It's very exciting when you're 10 years old. And it's by King's College London. It's for pupils, for parents, and for teachers. We have scaffolded lesson plans to accompany it. So we're really making the online space start to pull in the same direction as our face-to-face activity. Just launched another website called Born to Be, which is for parents, where they can have a Skype conversation with another parent. So we're really starting to experiment with what online can do to enhance and bolster what we're doing face-to-face with people. And the US is fantastic at this. If any of you have come across the Better Make Room campaign, genuinely one of the most inspiring online pieces of outreach I've ever seen. So this was set up by the Obama administration. It's actually Michelle Obama's project. Young people all over the US can sign up for text message prompts. This is a sample of one of the text messages, and these prompts help them to take all the steps to get to university. So it will remind you, for example, to do your FAFSA application, which is your financial aid application. It has significant effects on boosting completed FAFSA. It also has some unintended but quite nice spillover effects in terms of first year persistence. It uses lots of online pledging. Remember what I said about if you make a plan to do something, you're more likely to do it. The same works for young people, especially if they can put a photo to it. And so you go online and you say very simply and very clearly what you'd like to do and how you're going to get there. And it will remind you about the commitment you've made later on. These are some of the things that are starting to open up in terms of working with young people, which means we can reach a kid in the Outer Hebrides as easily as we can reach a kid down the road in Lambeth. This is hugely exciting for me, and one of the things I would like the British government to do is to invest some money into a programme like this that is nationwide. Okay, not got very long left, so I'll wrap up. A couple of things that have been sort of preoccupying me about online recently. The first one being the Government Office for Science, who did this fantastic review of lifelong learning. Lifelong learning only really works if you've got some education to build your lifelong learning off of. So my work in widening participation is intricately linked with the work of King's Online. I am part of the talent pipeline for the online programmes we run here at King's. But there's this fantastic saying in the beginning of this report: you want to get the Alan Tuckett section. The Alan Tuckett section is the best bit, which is about attitudes to learning. And he says this incredible thing. He said, in lifelong learning, supply drives demand. And I couldn't quite believe it, you know, because it's always the opposite way around. But I started to think about all the forms of education that will widen participation that I've potentially not taken the time to consider. For example, imagine a parent's degree. I've got lots of parents whose kids are going to university, they missed out, they want to do a degree. They go to Birkbeck, sometimes it works for them, sometimes it doesn't. I'm a Birkbeck student myself. But actually imagine I had something that's slotted alongside what their son or daughter is doing at university so they can understand and support them. I start to think about commuter students and how an online provision might work really well for them. It really got me thinking about attitudes to learning, because predominantly online learners are middle class, young, and already quite educated, and what it could do to open up broader educational opportunity. And I've also been reading quite a lot from the RSA on their Power to Create series. I mean, this is the perfect report, really, how social mobility can be aided by technology. What's great about this report is it takes the focus away from higher education and it says what can technology do at that next layer down, so at secondary and primary school level. And we know that if we get attainment up in those stages of education, the whole world of higher education opens up for kids. So for me, and certainly the Education Endowment Foundation has got some very promising findings, you can add about 4 months of attainment, additional attainment gain through technology-enhanced learning in the classroom at that age range. So for me, I'm really starting to think, well, how could we use some of the online technologies pre-arrival. I know there are some MOOCs in that space, particularly from the University of East Anglia, but I feel like there's a very rich set of opportunities there. But I mean, ultimately, online will only be a force for good if we design it with that intention. It could be, actually, if we're not careful, that online works against my agenda of social mobility. It allows people to accrue more and more education, to get more and more advances, to access more and more resource and support on the basis of ability to pay. So I really started to think about, well, if there's a great opportunity online, then we need to be mindful about how we approach it. Both the challenges and the opportunities of online education are laid out for us right there. Stony Brook University is one of the best universities in the world for social mobility. It takes kids from here and it makes sure they get right up here. It's a very, very impressive place in terms of social mobility. This is a great quote from Dr. Tiffany Joseph about how online could, if we don't think about it and we're not mindful about it, start to reinforce some of these inequalities that I've talked about. But I'm an optimist, and I think if Anna and I work together over the next 6 years, we could create something quite special that actually enhances social mobility here at King's and more broadly in the UK today. Okay, I always end with book recommendations. I hope you don't mind. These are things that are on my bookshelf. Mike Savage at the LSE has written a new form of categorisation of social class. It is incredible. The Spirit Level, Why Inequality Damages Society by Kate Pickett at the University of York. Bob Putnam, a classic book around opportunity gaps for children, and Lindsay Hanley's Respectable, which is a memoir and an experience of class through the lens of going to university. On the behavioural insights side, you've got to read Nudge. You can get a copy for like £4 now. If you're interested in text messaging, Ben Castleman at the University of Virginia, he is your man. He masterminded Better Make Room with Michelle Obama. Fantastic book right there. Scarcity. There's two forms of scarcity in the world. Rich people are time poor, and poor people are cash poor. And scarcity is what binds us together and is a new branch of economics. And then finally, David's insight into what it's like to try and apply behavioural economics in the real world and all of the catastrophes and brilliant moments you have putting trials into the field. And that's me done. Thank you very much.